A woman who always wears a veil was trapped in the attic and barely went outside. Anyone who saw her face ended up miserably. What exactly is this matter about? Let us find out in this classic movie, The Death of a Beauty. 300 years ago, in the castle of Lord Hassanbey in ancient China, there were waves of beautiful singing. The voice was as beautiful as a golden oriole singing. So mesmerizing. Turning out, it was the young lady, Mariam, was practicing singing. The Lord's nephew, Ali, was passing downstairs when he accidentally heard the singing and could not help quietly go upstairs. Ali knew that Mariam was extraordinarily beautiful, but somehow she hadn't gone downstairs for many years. He sneaked up and thought he would see a peerless beauty, but to his astonishment, he saw an ugly face that looked like a devil. Ali was frightened to mad and fell down the stairs. It turned out that Mariam was indeed a rare beauty a few years ago. But a fire destroyed her beauty, so she shut herself in the attic and always refused to come out and meet guests. Lord Hassanbey was worried that she was too lonely, so he tried to find a caring maid for her. But no matter what kind of person he found, Mariam was not very satisfied. So in the end, the Lord had to send the butler to find a maid in other cities. At this time, the king in the capital city was choosing a princess for his son. Therefore, many beautiful women came to the city. Although women wore a piece of black gauze like a veil as a courtesy, unexpectedly the butler caught a glimpse of a beautiful woman in the street. The woman's name was Pallida. Not only was she good looking, but also she danced exquisitely. It happened that the prince's favorite was a woman who was good at singing and dancing. So she was coming for the princess draft this time and was unwilling to go back with the butler. But the butler was in no hurry. Just as he expected, he met Pallida on the street again within a few days. It turned out that after Pallida showed her beautiful dance in front of the crowd, the king was very satisfied with her indeed. But the prince already had a candidate in his heart. Pallida failed to be chosen. After hesitating, she finally agreed to the butler's request. The butler soon took her back to the castle. What everyone didn't expect was that when the butler took Pallida back home, Mariam was very satisfied with her indeed. Pallida's feminine figure and beautiful face were quite similar to herself. That is, before she was disfigured. Seeing her was as if she was looking in a mirror. So Pallida stayed. When she first arrived, she set foot on the forbidden area of the attic for the first time, and finally met the rumored extremely beautiful lady. In the moonlight, Miss Mariam stood quietly in the room. She wears a gauze at all times, but it is not difficult to guess how beautiful she is, from her figure and the little white skin that she reveals. She is exotically and eye-catchingly beautiful, like a mixed-race beauty. Her skin is so delicate and as white as goat milk. Pallida thought to herself, "What a beauty she should be!" But then she observed wonderingly that the mirror in the room was covered with a black cloth for some reason. She wanted to take it off, but the lady nervously stopped her. There was suddenly loud thunder outside the window, and the frightened young lady screamed, and the gauze accidentally slipped off while struggling. At this time, outside the window, Ali's voice sounded again. "Devil! Devil! Mariam is a devil!" With a ray of skylight, Pallida saw the young lady's face. It was a face that will raise nightmare. because it was extremely deformed by the burn. Pallida was deeply frightened. Mariam's stepmother, Lara Guri, appeared quietly at this time. She warned Pallida not to tell anyone what happened tonight. Just when Pallida was at a loss for words, an old servant kindly told her the truth. It turned out that the lady's beautiful face was destroyed in a fire a few years ago. Since the young lady had been disfigured, they blocked the news because domestic shame should not be made public, except for a few personal servants. And the butler, the others didn't know the situation at all. Pallida gave the lady a little sympathy and pity. Although she had an ugly face, her singing voice and dancing posture were very moving. Pallida was gradually conquered by Miss Mariam's purity and charm, and the bond between master and servant grew stronger and stronger. As the days passed, the prince who had been drafted for her wife before was still unable to choose a favorite woman, because what he wanted was not a beauty who could sing and dance, but a shadow in the past. A few years ago, when the prince visited the Swan Lake, he had seen a beauty's dance posture. The shyness and bright eyes of hers were left deeply in his heart. From then on, she was the only one left in his heart. He promised to her that he would only marry the girl and he would wait until she grew up. But somehow he never met her again. Of course, the prince would never see her again, because that girl was actually Mariam. Her appearance had long been ruined, and even if she stood in front of the prince would not recognize her. However, the prince at this time didn't know this, and he was worried all day long after failing in the search for this beautiful woman. The king was very worried about it, so he encouraged the prince to go for a walk. He also persuaded him. "What if you happen to meet the girl you like outside?" The prince was convinced, and he followed the king to the other palace. They went to the city where Mariam lived, and the king even took the prince to visit the house of Lord Hassan Bey. Pallida, who was still watering the garden, saw the prince and his attendants at once, so she pleasantly told Mariam. As soon as Mariam heard it, she knew it was her lover, whom she was constantly thinking about. She didn't know if the prince still remembered her. Her heart was full of excitement and emotions. But as soon as she thought of her disfigured face, she soon turned very desperate. In the hall, the lord hosted a banquet for the prince and others. During the banquet, someone suddenly mentioned Miss Mariam, saying that he had heard that she was unbelievably pretty and her dance was graceful. So the guests asked her to come downstairs to sing and dance for them. Now it was very tough for the lord. How could Mariam come out to dance? Her face was already ruined. The stepmother, Lara Guri, was very shrewd. After thinking about it, she came up with an idea. Since Pallida and Mariam were similar in both body and appearance, why didn't she dance on behalf of Mariam? So Pallida changed into the lady's clothes and danced in front of the guests. The delicate dress was swaying brilliantly and beautifully. The prince saw the golden veil on Pallida in a distance, and the memory instantly came to his mind. It was her! It was her! He was so excited that it was almost impossible to hold on to himself. This was the exact feeling of hundreds and thousands of times I searched her in the crowd. Suddenly I turned, and there she stands in the dim light. The woman he was dreaming of was right here. In the evening, the prince took his servant to the ladies downstairs. After several troubles, he finally saw Mariam, who wore a turban, a golden veil. In the dimly lit room, the candlelight flickered. Mariam stood quietly in the room, resolutely refusing to remove the turban from her face. The prince confessed his love to her so passionately and promised that he would come to propose marriage soon. But poor Mariam, her heart was suffering. Even if her lover was right in front of her, her heart was even more painful, as if a knife was stabbing it. Could this be a trick from heaven? All this made her feel happy and painful at the same time. The prince left soon. Within a few days, he really came back and proposed a marriage as promised. But it made Lord Hassan Bey awkward. Mariam had been disfigured. How could he marry her? Lara Guri, the young lady's stepmother, had a bad bone. She came up with a bad idea. We should have Palida married to him instead of our daughter. After all, she was the one who danced in front of the prince. Lord Hassan Bey thought about it for a while and hesitated. Lara Guri said that she had her own reasons and there was no other way. So in the end, the decision was made, according to Lara Guri's plan. She first seduced Palida with gold, silver, and jewelry, hoping she would obey. What surprised her was Palida remained unmoved. Immediately, she threatened Palida that she would hurt her family. Although Palida was extremely helpless, she had no choice but to agree. After getting a satisfactory answer, Lara Guri quickly began to make arrangements for the wedding. In fact, she had long ganged up with the butler by bribing him, so the butler coaxed Mariam into a carriage away from home, on the pretext of taking her on an early vacation. It turned out that Miss Mariam would actually go to the Swan Lake for a vacation on some special occasions. So they lured her into thinking that they were going to take her to Swan Lake this time, but actually they were going to send Mariam far away for good and get rid of her before the wedding so that the prince doesn't find out the truth. Now for this fake alternative marriage strategy to work, the stepmother, Lara Guri, and the butler worked together to deceive everyone and secretly sent Mariam away. Of course, Palida, who came to know about the truth, rushed to Mariam's rescue immediately. But oh no, she was quickly discovered by the butler and brought back again to the palace. At this time, Mariam's carriage was driving farther and farther into the endless Gobi Desert. Mariam noticed they were going off track and tried to stop the carriage. She forcefully hit on the sides of the carriage, trying to get the driver to stop, but the carriage wouldn't. It kept driving on and on, into the unknown. People in the carriage felt something wrong. The scenery in front of them was bleak. Mariam began to feel afraid. She loudly rebuked the coachman and ordered him to stop. Where was he driving her? But the coachman turned a deaf ear. Mariam and her servants were physically weak. They were finally taken to an ancient city in the girl country. It is actually a place where only girls lived. Not a very nice place. They just send girls away here and they suffer silently to their deaths. Mariam was locked up there. At this time, in the castle of Lord Hassan Bey, Palida was sitting alone in the room. In Mariam's room, filled with laughters of Mariam and Palida, loving memories. She was so sad. She missed Mariam. Palida didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the old servant who had told her the truth appeared again. This time, what she told her was the most terrifying truth in the castle. The fire that disfigured Mariam a few years ago was actually planned by Lara Guri. In addition to the lady's jealousy of Mariam's more and more beautiful appearance, the purpose of the fire was more about seizing the property of this family. Laraguri used to be young and beautiful, although she was just a servant. She was quite capable. Somehow she witnessed the death of the Lord's wife. Some believe she was involved directly in it, directly killing the Lord's wife so as to take her place. Later, she also bribed the butler, trying to control all the power in the family. But in the past few years, she had seen the Lord favor his daughter Mariam more than Laraguri herself. This made Laraguri afraid that she will not be able to possess the money she wanted. So she set the fire in hope that it could burn Mariam to death. Fortunately, the young lady Mariam escaped in the end, but her flowery face was disfigured, and it was impossible for her to go back to the past. After hearing the truth, Pallida was deeply shocked. When she was about to ask for more details, the old servant stopped breathing. Ha 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 ha! Laraguri, what are you doing here? The old woman can't seem to keep secrets, so I poisoned her wine. Pallida was left to grieve. Soon it was the wedding day. Pallida put on the most exquisite red wedding gown. She was dressed up as beautiful as a fairy. However, she wore the most bleak expression on her face. She could really care less. She was not interested at all. She felt she was betraying her young lady, and she couldn't do anything against the power of Laraguri. However, her heart was constantly being shaken by guilt, condemned by conscience. She secretly sent for a maid to find the prince and fetch him to her. She told him the entire truth. The prince assured that he'll fix everything. He'll find Mariam and everyone can be happy again. At this moment, Pallida suddenly collapsed into his arms. A bright streak of blood began to spill over from the corner of her beautiful, arrow-shaped lips. Pallida had taken poison. She couldn't stand the self-blame in her heart. The blood was mixed with the bright red dress. The beautiful flower Pallida withered at her most beautiful age. The prince yelled, cried out for Pallida to return, but it would be of no help. Pallida would never come back. But soon the prince stopped grieving, because there was a lover for him to save. So he climbed onto his horse and hurried to the ancient city according to Pallida's directions. The maids could see the prince coming on his horse. They immediately told Mariam. Mariam was surprised. She was just playing a sad song about destiny on a ukulele. She knew that she had to face the prince sooner or later. She twirled around and frantically asked her maids, "My appearance has been long destroyed. How can I be with the prince ever?" In many beautiful fairy tales, the prince rescued the beautiful princess. And that is the happy ending. But for Mariam, such a happy ending can only mean a complete tragedy. In order to prevent her beloved from seeing her true appearance, Mariam put on her best-looking dress. Yes, the one with the golden veil, the one where Pallida wore and the prince mistook her for Mariam. Like Cinderella's shoe, in this story, it's the dress and the golden veil. She waved. Now she was standing over a cliff and the prince was riding towards the cliff. Atop is the palace where Mariam was staying, and she waved the golden veil at him, and Prince could recognize that it was his Mariam. She held a cluster of beautiful roses in her hand. From afar, Mariam looked like a wild lily swaying gently in the wind. And then Mariam jumped. She jumped off the tower. The beautiful soul floated down in the air. The prince approached Mariam with tears in his eyes. However, just when he was about to remove the veil from Mariam's face, he stopped in his tracks. He wanted to respect his lady's decision that for him to never see her destroyed face, so that he can remember his Mariam as the beautiful Mariam forever. He chose to respect Mariam's long-cherished wish. Mariam didn't dare face him, and for this reason she didn't even hesitate for a second to pay the price of her life. So how could the prince ignore her final wish? He hugged Mariam gently and carried her slowly. Over at the castle of Lord Hassan Bey, Laura Guri heard about the death of Mariam and Pallida. She sat alone in a dark room, and suddenly her sense of shame became intense, more and more intense. Remorse got hold of her, and she torched herself and the entire castle to ashes. She brought down with her the sinful and ghastly castle and herself down. The death of a beauty has been adapted from a legend in ancient China. It has been circulating around for many years. Pallida's bravery, Mariam's innocence and pride, Pallida's sacrifice for her friend, their beautiful friendship is very impressive. It is very similar to Cinderella in many aspects. The prince could not recognize his beloved, and he could with the help of a piece of garment, like a shoe or a veil. It is indeed quite like a fairy tale. And to notice, the prince had different reactions when he saw Pallida dancing with and without the golden veil. I felt that was also quite intriguing. What is love? For the prince, Mariam was as beautiful as she used to be a few years ago. For Mariam, lifting the veil would mean revealing the cruel truth about their love. She fears that the dreams of true love of the prince would be shattered if he sees her face. She would rather sleep forever with this cruel truth. Mariam is dead, but her beauty would remain forever in the prince's heart, and that would be enough.